August 14, 1908, Springfield, Illinois, the city of Abraham Lincoln, the man who freed the slaves. That's what they taught you in school, right? The great emancipator's hometown, a beacon of freedom and progress. But on this night, as the sun set over Washington Street, something was about to happen that would expose the ugliest truth about America. A truth so devastating, so systematically evil, that they erased it from history books for 80 years. Picture this. It's 7:30 in the evening. Scott Burton, 56 years old, is closing up his barbershop on Washington Street. He's one of the most successful black businessmen in Springfield. His shop serves both white and black customers. He's built something real, something lasting. Just down the street, 84-year-old William Donegan is finishing his day as a cobbler. He's been married to his wife for 30 years. 30 years in Lincoln City. He owns property. He's respected. He's made it. All around them, the black business district is thriving. Restaurants, grocery stores, tailors, beauty salons, churches, homes built solid and clean. This is black wealth. This is black success. 43 years after Lincoln freed the slaves, black people in his own city have built empires from nothing. No loans, no help. Just faith and work and blood and sweat. By 9 o'clock that night, it was all on fire. By midnight, Scott Burton was hanging from a tree in front of his own barbershop. His crime being too successful for a black man. William Donegan was dragged from his home while his wife screamed and begged. They lynched him 200 yards from his front door. His crime living 30 years of dignity that white supremacy couldn't tolerate. Over 40 black businesses burned to ash. Over $150,000 destroyed. That's $5 million in today's money. But it's not just about money. It's about what that money represented. Generational wealth, security, power, freedom, all of it turned to smoke in 2 nights of orchestrated terror. And here's what makes your blood boil. For 80 years, they didn't teach this in Springfield schools. For 80 years, they called it a riot, not a massacre. For 80 years, they blamed black people for their own destruction. They said we provoked it. They said we deserved it. They lied. This video is going to destroy every lie you were taught about American history. By the end of this, you're going to understand 3 things with absolute clarity. First, the wealth gap you're living in right now was not created by accident. It was created by design. It was created by systematic destruction of black wealth every single time we built it. Second, Springfield, 1908 was not unique. It was the blueprint. It happened in Tulsa. It happened in Rosewood. It happened in Wilmington. It happened in East St. Louis. It happened everywhere black people dared to be successful. Third, this is not ancient history. This is your great-grandparents' lifetime. Some of you watching right now, your families fled Springfield that night. Your ancestors lost everything. And that loss echoes in your bank account, today, in your neighborhood, today, in your children's opportunities today. This isn't about making you angry. Anger without direction is just pain. This is about giving you truth. Truth that empowers. Truth that explains. Truth that demands justice. Because once you see what was stolen, once you understand the scale of the theft, you'll never accept their excuses again. You'll never believe their lies about why we're still behind. You'll know. And when you know, everything changes. Are you ready? Because what I'm about to show you is going to shatter your understanding of America. It's going to make you question everything they taught you. And it should. Because they lied to you. They lied to your parents. They lied to your grandparents. The truth was buried under 80 years of silence. But silence has an expiration date. And today, that date has come. Let me take you back to Springfield before the fire, before the blood, before the terror. Because you need to understand what was destroyed to understand what was stolen from you. After the Civil War ended in 1865, Black people began what historians called the Great Migration. They fled the South, fleeing the terror of the Klan, the violence of Reconstruction, the impossible sharecropping contracts that kept them in slavery by another name. They came north looking for the promise of freedom, real freedom, economic freedom, and thousands of them came to Springfield, Illinois. Why? Because it was Lincoln's city. The great emancipator lived here, practiced law here, was buried here. If freedom had a home address in America, it should have been Springfield. By 1908, Springfield had about 3,000 Black residents. That's roughly 10% of the total population. Not a majority, not threatening anyone's political power, just 3,000 people trying to build lives. And build they did. The Black community concentrated in an area locals called the Badlands and the East End. Don't let that name fool you. This wasn't a slum. This was a thriving business district. You had Black-owned restaurants serving food that would make your mouth water, grocery stores where Black families could shop with dignity, tailors making custom suits, beauty salons where Black women were treated like queens, churches that served as the heartbeat of the community, places of worship and organizing and education and resistance. And then you had men like Scott Burton, born in 1852, just 7 years before Lincoln's debates with Douglas. Burton had spent his entire adult life perfecting his craft as a barber. By 1908, his shop on Washington Street was legendary. White businessmen came to get shaved by Burton. Black professionals came to get their hair cut by the master. He wasn't just serving a niche, he was competing and winning in the broader Springfield economy. That's wealth. That's power. That's what they couldn't tolerate. William Dunnigan was even more threatening to white supremacy. Born in 1824, he had lived through the entire arc of American slavery and emancipation. He had been free in the North, while slavery still raged in the South. He had learned a trade, become a master cobbler, built a reputation for quality work. And then, in the ultimate transgression, he had married a white woman. 30 years before Springfield burned, William Dunnigan had married across the color line and lived openly with his wife. For 30 years, he had defied the most sacred rule of white supremacy. Every day he walked down the street with his wife was a day that said, Black men are equal to white men. We can love the same. We can build the same. We can be the same. The white establishment watched this Black success with growing resentment. See, the first decade of the 1900s was economically rough for working-class white people. The Panic of 1907 had caused a recession. Jobs were scarce, money was tight, and when white people struggled economically, they did what they always did. They looked for someone to blame. They didn't blame the bankers who caused the panic. They didn't blame the industrialists who paid poverty wages. They blamed Black people. How dare these Negroes thrive while we struggle? How dare they own businesses while we're unemployed? How dare they live in nice homes while we're barely scraping by? Newspapers fanned these flames. The local Springfield papers regularly ran stories about the Negro menace. They printed racist cartoons. They published editorials warning about Black crime, Black vice, Black threats to white women. They were building a narrative. They were constructing justification. When the violence came, and they knew it would come, they wanted the public primed to accept it. This is the world Scott Burton and William Dunnigan lived in. Success under siege. Achievement surrounded by envy and hatred. They had to be twice as good to get half as far. They had to be perfect, because any mistake would be used to condemn the entire race. They carried the weight of representation every single day. And still they succeeded. Still they built. Still they refused to bow. That's who they were. That's what Springfield's black community had created by 1908. Not perfection, but progress. Not a utopia, but a foundation. Generational wealth was being built. Children were being educated. Businesses were being passed down. The future looked possible. And white supremacy could not allow that to continue. Now here's where the lie begins. The lie they taught in every history book that bothered to mention Springfield at all. They said it started with a rape. They said a black man named George Richardson attacked a white woman named Mabel Hallam. They said the black community tried to protect Richardson from justice. They said white people simply defended their women and their honor. That's the lie. Let me give you the truth. On August 14, 1908, Mabel Hallam, a white woman married to a white streetcar conductor, claimed she had been dragged from her bed and raped by a black man. She identified George Richardson, a black laborer, as her attacker. The white community exploded in rage. A lynch mob formed immediately. They went to the county jail demanding Richardson be turned over for immediate execution. No trial, no evidence, no justice. Just a rope and a tree. But here's what they didn't tell you in the history books. Mabel Hallam was lying. She made the entire story up. Years later, on her deathbed, she admitted it. There was no rape. There was no attack. She had been having an affair with a white man and needed to explain suspicious circumstances to her husband. So she did what white women had been doing since slavery. She blamed a black man. She knew that accusation was a death sentence. She knew a black man would die for her lie, and she did it anyway. But even more importantly, even if the rape had been real, what happened next had nothing to do with justice or protecting women. What happened next was about economic warfare disguised as racial revenge. When the mob arrived at the jail and discovered Richardson had already been moved to a different location for his safety, did they go home? Did they wait for the legal system? No. They said, and this is a direct quote from witnesses, "We'll burn the town. If we can't have Richardson, we'll burn the town." That tells you everything. This was never about one alleged crime. This was about using any excuse to destroy black economic success. They had been waiting for a trigger. Mabel Hallam gave them one, and they took it. The mob started by burning the car of Harry Loper. Now Harry Loper was white. He owned a restaurant. His crime. He had driven his car to help transport Richardson to safety. He had refused to participate in the lynching, so they burned his car as a warning. If you're white and you protect black people, you're a traitor. You'll burn too. By 9 p.m., 5,000 white people had gathered. 5,000. That's not a spontaneous riot. That's an organized military operation. Think about it. In 1908, there were no cell phones, no social media, no instant communication. Yet somehow, within 2 hours, 5,000 white people mobilized with torches, guns, and coordinated plans. How? Because it was organized. Local white leaders, business owners, police officers, they had prepared for this. They had waited for this. And when the moment came, they executed their plan with military precision. The mob moved into the Badlands first, the heart of the black business district. They didn't go randomly. They had targets. They had lists. They went to the most successful businesses first. They went to the nicest homes first. They went to the black people who had climbed highest, achieved, most threatened white economic supremacy most directly. Scott Burton's barbershop was one of the first buildings hit. They smashed the windows, poured kerosene inside, set it ablaze. When Burton tried to defend his life's work, they grabbed him, dragged him into the street, beat him with fists and clubs and whatever weapons they had. And then they lynched him. They hung him from a tree right in front of his burning barbershop. They wanted everyone to see. They wanted the message to be clear. This is what happens to uppity Negroes who think they can be successful in our city. William Donegan heard the chaos and tried to hide. He was 84 years old. What threat could an 84-year-old cobbler possibly pose? But age didn't matter. His crime wasn't violence. His crime was dignity. His crime was 30 years of marriage to a white woman. His crime was living proof that black men could be equal to white men. So they came for him. His wife Sarah answered the door. She begged them. He's an old man. He's done nothing wrong. We've lived here peacefully for 30 years. Please, please leave him alone. They shoved her aside, dragged William from his home. Sarah chased them down the street, screaming, crying, begging for mercy. None came. They took William 200 yards from his front door, close enough that Sarah could still see, close enough that she would have to live with that image for the rest of her life. They beat him, they stabbed him, they lynched him, and they left his body hanging as the sun rose on August 15th. The mob didn't stop with Burton and Donegan. They went business to business, home to home. More than 40 black-owned buildings burned that night and into the next day. Restaurants where families had eaten Sunday dinners, grocery stores where children had bought candy, homes where generations had been raised. All of it ash. Black families fled in terror. Mothers grabbed children and ran into the night with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Men who had fought for America in the Spanish-American War just 10 years earlier now had to flee for their lives from American citizens in an American city. Elderly people who had survived slavery now had to survive this. They hid in basements and attics in the woods outside town. Anywhere the mob wouldn't find them. And where were the police? Some were in the mob. Others stood by and watched. The few who tried to intervene were threatened into silence. The fire department, they protected white properties and let black buildings burn. The state government Governor Charles Deneen didn't call in the National Guard until 2 full days of destruction had passed. 2 days. 40 buildings burned, 2 men lynched, dozens more injured, and the government waited. They waited because they wanted this to happen. They wanted black wealth destroyed. They wanted the message sent. When the smoke cleared on August 16th, 9 people were dead, 7 black, 2 white. But those numbers tell a lie, the 2 white deaths. One was a white man who got caught in crossfire when the National Guard finally arrived. The other was a white man who committed suicide reportedly out of shame for what his community had done. The 7 black deaths murdered, lynched, executed, not caught in crossfire, targeted for elimination. More than $150,000 in property was destroyed. In today's money, that's $5 million. But that number is also a lie, because it only counts the immediate property damage. It doesn't count the businesses that never reopened. It doesn't count the generational wealth that was never passed down. It doesn't count the children who grew up in poverty because their parents lost everything. It doesn't count the 100 years of compounding interest on stolen wealth. When you calculate the real cost, when you add it all up with proper economic analysis, Springfield 1908 cost the black community hundreds of millions of dollars in today's value. But the worst part, the part that should make you want to flip a table, is what happened next. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not one person was convicted for the murders of Scott Burton and William Donegan. Not one person went to jail for burning 40 businesses. Not one white person faced any consequence whatsoever. The police said they couldn't identify anyone in the mob. 5,000 people, 2 full nights of violence, dozens of witnesses. And somehow they couldn't identify a single perpetrator. They didn't want to. This was policy. This was approved. This was the point. And then came the cover-up. the cover-up that lasted 80 years. They started by changing the language. They called it the Springfield Race Riot. A riot. That word is important. A riot implies chaos, disorder, both sides fighting. But this wasn't a riot. This was a pogrom. This was an organized ethnic cleansing. This was economic terrorism. But if you call it a riot, you can blame both sides. You can say tensions were high. Things got out of control. Mistakes were made. You erase the truth of what really happened. Newspapers outside Springfield initially reported the horror accurately, but within weeks the narrative shifted. Stories started emphasizing how many white people died. They inflated the numbers. They invented black attackers. They created a false equivalence. Some papers claimed more white people died than black people. That was a complete fabrication. But it worked. It muddied the waters. It gave white America permission to forget. Insurance companies refused to pay black property owners. They had riot exclusion clauses in their policies. Since the city officially called it a riot, insurance didn't have to pay. Imagine that. You pay premiums for years. Your business burns down through no fault of your own. And the insurance company says, "Sorry, riot clause, you get nothing." Legal theft. Sanctioned theft. Theft with a smile and a signature. The city changed zoning laws after the massacre. Areas where black people had owned property were rezoned for industrial use. Black families couldn't rebuild their homes because suddenly the land wasn't zoned residential anymore. White developers bought the land cheap from desperate black families who had no choice. Then those white developers waited a few years and got the zoning changed back to residential. They built new homes and businesses and sold them to white families. The same land that had been black wealth became white wealth. Transfer complete. Theft complete. Future generations would never know black people had owned that land first. And the worst erasure of all education. For 80 years, Springfield Public Schools did not teach the 1908 massacre. Think about that. 80 years. 3 generations of Springfield children, black and white, grew up not knowing. Black children didn't know their ancestors had built thriving businesses in that city. They didn't know their great-great-grandparents had been wealthy. They grew up thinking black poverty was natural, inevitable, our fault. White children didn't know their city had committed ethnic cleansing. They grew up thinking black poverty was evidence of black inferiority, not evidence of white terrorism. That's the power of educational erasure. You don't have to burn books if you never write the truth in the first place. You don't have to revise history if you simply never teach it. Silence is erasure. Silence is murder of memory. And they kept silent for 80 years. It wasn't until the 1980s and 90s that historians started dragging this story back into the light. It wasn't until 2008, 100 years after the massacre, that Springfield held its first official commemoration. It wasn't until 2024, just last year, that President Biden designated the Springfield 1908 race riot sites as a national monument. 116 years. That's how long it took for America to officially acknowledge what happened. Your great-grandparents lived and died without acknowledgement. Your grandparents lived most of their lives without acknowledgement. And they want you to move on. They want you to forgive and forget. They want you to stop talking about the past. The past isn't past when it was never acknowledged in the first place. The past isn't past when the wealth that was stolen still hasn't been returned. The past isn't past when the systems that enabled Springfield are still operating today under different names. Now here's where your anger needs to transform into understanding. Because Springfield 1908 wasn't unique. It wasn't an aberration. It wasn't one bad incident in an otherwise fair system. Springfield was the blueprint. It was the pattern. And that pattern repeated over and over and over across America for decades. Every single time black people built wealth, they destroyed it. Every single time we climbed, they cut the ladder. Every single time we succeeded, they burned our success to the ground. This wasn't random. This wasn't bad luck. This was systematic. This was policy. This was the way American white supremacy maintained power. Not through laws alone, not through politics alone, through economic terrorism that kept black people perpetually starting over, perpetually at the bottom, perpetually dependent. Let me show you the pattern. Let me show you how Springfield 1908 was just one link in a chain of destruction that spanned decades and destroyed billions of dollars in black wealth. Because when you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. When you see the pattern, you understand why the wealth gap exists. When you see the pattern, you stop blaming yourself and start demanding reparations. Let's go back 10 years before Springfield. November 10th, 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina. This was the crown jewel of black political and economic power in the South. Wilmington had a black majority population. Black men held positions on the city council. Black people owned newspapers, businesses, properties. The Daily Record, a black-owned newspaper edited by Alex Manley, was one of the most influential publications in the state. Black people in Wilmington had actual power, not just economic success, political power. White supremacists couldn't tolerate it. They organized a white Declaration of Independence. Yes, you read that right. They literally wrote a Declaration of Independence from black political participation. They promised to take the city back by any means necessary. And on November 10th, 1898, they did. 300 to 400 armed white men, many of them from the White Government Union and the Red Shirts paramilitary group, attacked the Black District. They started by burning the Daily Record newspaper building. They wanted to destroy Black voice first. Then they moved through the Black Business District, shooting, burning, destroying. They murdered somewhere between 25 and 300 black people. Historians still don't know the exact count, because white authorities never bothered to keep accurate records of black deaths. We mattered so little that they didn't even count our bodies. But here's the most insane part. After the massacre, the white mob forced the entire city government to resign at gunpoint. They installed their own white supremacist government. They literally overthrew a democratically elected government and installed themselves as dictators. This is the only successful coup d'etat in American history. The only time an armed mob overthrew a government and got away with it. And they did it to destroy black political power. Thousands of black people fled Wilmington permanently. Those who stayed lost their political positions, their businesses, their property. The new white government made sure of that. And for 100 years, this was called the Wilmington Race Riot. A riot. Not a massacre, not a coup, not ethnic cleansing. A riot. They lied, they erased, they covered up, just like Springfield. Now jump forward to 1917, East St. Louis, Illinois, the same state as Springfield, just 100 miles south. Black people had been migrating there from the south to work in factories and meatpacking plants. White workers saw black workers as competition for jobs. Tensions rose, and on July 2nd, 1917, those tensions exploded into violence. For hours, white mobs roamed black neighborhoods. They set homes on fire and then shot black people as they fled the flames. Read that again. They set homes on fire and shot people as they tried to escape. They killed men, women, children. They beat black people to death in the streets. They threw black people off bridges into the river. Official counts say 39 black people died. Eyewitness accounts and later investigations suggest it was closer to 200. 6,000 black residents fled the city, never to return. And the cause? Economics. White workers didn't want competition. White business owners wanted to break black labor organizing, so they used racial violence as a weapon of economic warfare. They destroyed black life to protect white economic interests. That's the pattern. That's always the pattern. 2 years later, 1919, Elaine, Arkansas. Black sharecroppers and tenant farmers were organizing. They wanted fair wages. They wanted honest accounting of what they were owed. They wanted to not be cheated every harvest season by white landowners who controlled the books. So they formed the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. They met in a church to discuss their demands. White planters found out. They couldn't allow black people to organize economically. They couldn't allow black people to demand fair wages. That threatened the entire sharecropping system, which was just slavery by another name. So they attacked. On September 30th, 1919, white mobs and federal troops attacked black farmers in Elaine. They killed between 100 and 240 black people. They burned black churches. They burned homes. They arrested over 1,000 black people on charges of insurrection. Insurrection. Black people demanding fair wages was labeled an insurrection. 12 black men were sentenced to death. It took years of appeals and national NAACP intervention to get those sentences overturned. And not a single white person was charged with murder, despite dozens of white people participating in the massacre. The message was clear. If you're black and you organize economically, you will be destroyed. Then came 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the one most people have heard of now, but only because it was so massive they couldn't erase it completely. Greenwood District, Black Wall Street, the wealthiest black community in America. Over 300 businesses, banks, hotels, luxury shops, doctors, lawyers, millionaires. More millionaires per capita than Beverly Hills. Black people had built an economic empire in Tulsa. May 31st, 1921, Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoeshiner, was accused of assaulting Sarah Page, a white elevator operator. The accusation was almost certainly false. They likely had a consensual relationship that was discovered, but truth didn't matter. A white mob formed. The black community, many of them World War I veterans, armed themselves to defend Rowland from lynching. A shot was fired. No one knows who fired first. And then all hell broke loose. Over the next 16 hours, white mobs and the Tulsa Police Department, working together, burned 35 city blocks to the ground. They used airplanes to drop firebombs on black homes and businesses. Read that again. They dropped bombs from airplanes on an American city to destroy black wealth. They killed an estimated 300 black people, though the real number may be closer to 800. They left 10,000 black people homeless. They destroyed over 1,200 homes and 300 businesses. Property damage was over $32 million in today's money. But with proper economic analysis, accounting for lost generational wealth, the real cost is in the billions. And just like Springfield insurance companies refused to pay, just like Springfield, the city changed zoning laws to prevent rebuilding. Just like Springfield, no white people were convicted of murder. Just like Springfield, it was erased from history books. Oklahoma textbooks didn't mention the Tulsa massacre until 2002. 81 years of silence, 81 years of erasure. 3 generations grew up not knowing. One more. 1923, Rosewood, Florida, a small black town, about 350 residents, mostly homeowners, mostly employed, mostly doing fine. On January 1st, 1923, a white woman named Fannie Taylor claimed a black man had assaulted her, just like Mabel Hallam in Springfield. just like Sarah Page in Tulsa. The accusation was false. Fannie Taylor was having an affair and needed to cover it up, but her lie became a death sentence for an entire town. White mobs from surrounding areas descended on Rosewood. For 6 days, they burned every single building, every home, every church, every business. They shot black people on sight. They hunted black families hiding in the swamps. Between 6 and 150 black people were killed. No one knows for sure because white authorities didn't bother counting. The entire town was erased. Literally erased. Go to Rosewood today. There's nothing there. Just empty land where a thriving black town once stood. And Florida didn't acknowledge this happened until 1994. 71 years. Nearly 3/4 of a century. 2 whole generations of black Floridians grew up not knowing their own history. Do you see it now? Do you see the pattern? Springfield, 1908. Wilmington, 1898. East St. Louis, 1917. Elaine, 1919. Tulsa, 1921. Rosewood, 1923. I could keep going. There are dozens more. Hundreds more if you count every single incident of white mobs destroying black economic progress. This wasn't random. This wasn't unfortunate. This wasn't a few bad apples. This was systematic. This was organized. This was the American way of maintaining racial economic hierarchy. Every single time black people built wealth, they destroyed it. Every single time. And then they erased it from history, so the next generation wouldn't know what was stolen. So you wouldn't know what you're owed. So you would blame yourself for being poor instead of demanding reparations for the theft. This is why the wealth gap exists. Not because black people don't work hard. Not because we make bad choices. Not because we lack ambition or intelligence or discipline. Because every time we built wealth, they burned it. And they've been doing it for over a century. But hold on, because the next question is even more important than what happened. The next question is, how did they get away with it? How did they destroy entire communities and face no consequences? How did they erase these massacres from history so completely that most Americans still don't know they happened? That's what I need to show you next, because the cover-up is just as evil as the crime. Let me tell you about Kerma. The Kingdom of Kerma existed in northern Sudan from 2500 to 1500 BC. That is 1,000 years before Kush even conquered Egypt. 1,000 years. Kerma was a sophisticated urban civilization with monumental architecture, long-distance trade networks, and a centralized government. The capital city had a population of over 10,000 people. They built massive structures out of mud brick, including the Eastern Defufa, a temple that stands 18 meters tall and still exists today. Archaeologists have excavated royal tombs at Kerma that contained hundreds of human sacrifices. Now, human sacrifice is brutal, but it tells us something important. It tells us this was a society with enough centralized power to command that level of obedience. It tells us there was a ruling elite with absolute authority. It tells us this was not some primitive tribal society. This was a kingdom. Swiss archaeologist Charles Bonnet spent decades excavating Kerma, starting in the 1970s. He found evidence of advanced metallurgy, pottery production, textile weaving, and extensive trade with Egypt, Central Africa, and the Red Sea coast. He found artifacts that proved Kerma was a major power in the ancient world. And his findings are published. They are in academic journals. They are in museums. The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston has an entire collection of Kerma artifacts. But here is the problem. Kerma was discovered in 1913, and for the next 60 years, it was largely ignored. Early archaeologists called it primitive. They dismissed the monuments as crude. They refused to believe that black Africans could have built a civilization that advanced that early. It was not until the 1970s, when Bonnet started his excavations, that the true scope of Kerma became undeniable. And even then, it took another 20 years before it started appearing in textbooks. Most American high school students today still do not learn about Kerma. It is not in the curriculum. It is not on the standardized tests. It is not part of the narrative. And then there is Aksum. The kingdom of Aksum, located in modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, existed from 100 to 940 AD. It was one of the four great powers of the ancient world, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. Aksum minted its own coins in gold, silver, and bronze. That is a mark of a sophisticated economy. Only the most powerful kingdoms could mint currency. Aksum developed its own alphabet Ge'ez script, which is still used in Ethiopia today. They built stone obelisks up to 33 meters tall, weighing 520 tons that still stand. Aksum controlled the Red Sea trade routes. They were a maritime empire. They had a navy. They conquered parts of southern Arabia, modern-day Yemen, in 520 AD. They defeated Persian proxy states. They were mentioned by Roman historians, Byzantine chroniclers, and even in the Quran. The Prophet Muhammad himself told his early followers to seek refuge in Aksum because it was ruled by a just king. And yet, how many world history classes teach about Aksum? How many students learn that an African kingdom was considered one of the great powers of the classical world? How many textbooks include Aksumite coins, Aksumite obelisks, Aksumite military campaigns? Almost none. Aksum is called mysterious in most Western sources, even though we have written records from Aksum itself, from Rome, from Byzantium, from Persia, from Arabia. It is not mysterious. It is ignored. Then there is Great Zimbabwe, built between 1100 and 1450 AD. Great Zimbabwe was the capital of a massive trade empire in southern Africa. The city had a population of 18,000 at its peak. It was surrounded by stone walls 11 meters high and 5 meters thick, built without any mortar. The stones were cut and fitted so precisely that they locked together through sheer engineering skill. The Great Enclosure, the largest structure, is the biggest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa, south of the Nile Valley. Great Zimbabwe controlled gold trade routes that extended to China, Persia, and India. Archaeologists have found Chinese pottery, Persian glass beads, and Indian textiles at the site. This was a city connected to the global economy of the medieval world, and it still stands. You can visit it. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But here is what happened when Europeans first encountered Great Zimbabwe in the 1800s. They refused to believe Africans built it. British colonizers and archaeologists claimed it must have been built by Phoenicians or Arabs, or even the Queen of Sheba. Anything but Africans. In the 1890s, the British South Africa Company literally rewrote the history. They published reports saying the ruins were evidence of ancient non-African civilizations. In 1905, the archaeologist David Randall McIver proved conclusively that Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people, the indigenous Africans of the region. His evidence was overwhelming. The architecture matched other Shona sites. The artifacts were consistent with Shona culture. There was no evidence of Phoenician or Arab construction techniques. It was an African city built by Africans, and he was attacked for it. Other archaeologists called him biased. The Rhodesian government, the white supremacist colonial government, banned his findings from being taught in schools. In the 1970s, archaeologist Peter Garlake continued McIver's work and published even more definitive proof that Great Zimbabwe was African. The Rhodesian government fired him, defunded his research, and threatened him with arrest if he continued publishing. It was not until 1980, when Rhodesia became Zimbabwe and Black Africans took control of the government, that the true history of Great Zimbabwe was allowed to be taught. 1980. That is 45 years ago. There are people alive today who grew up being taught that Africans did not build Great Zimbabwe. That lie was official government policy within living memory. And finally, let me tell you about Meroitic script. After the Kushite pharaohs lost control of Egypt, the kingdom of Kush continued in Meroe, and around 200 BC, they developed their own writing system. Not hieroglyphs borrowed from Egypt, their own alphabet. 23 unique symbols. It was used for over 600 years. We have found over 1,000 inscriptions in Meroitic script on temples, pottery, royal monuments, and everyday objects. Now here is the thing. Meroitic script was partially deciphered in the 1970s. We know the phonetic values of the symbols. We can pronounce the words. But we still do not fully understand the language because there has been almost no funding for research. Compare that to Egyptian hieroglyphs. Governments, universities, and private foundations have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into Egyptology. The Rosetta Stone was deciphered in 1822, and since then, we have translated tens of thousands of Egyptian texts. But Meroitic minimal funding, minimal research. For decades, museums labeled Meroitic inscriptions as decorative symbols or undeciphered, even though we know they are writing. Why? Because if Kush had its own written language, it means they had bureaucracy, administration, literature, history. It means they were not just warriors or traders. They were a literate civilization, and that complicates the narrative. Do you see the pattern now? Every time Black Africans built empires, they erased it. Every time we created writing, they called it decorative. Every time we built stone cities, they said someone else did it. Every single time. This was not accident. This was not oversight. This was policy. From the 1880s to the 1960s, during the height of European colonialism, there were official policies in place. Textbooks used in colonial Africa could not say that Africans built civilizations. Museums in Europe and America could not credit Black people for the artifacts they displayed. Archaeologists who told the truth were fired, defunded, and blacklisted. This is documented. This is in the historical record. Why? Because if Black people built pyramids, developed alphabets, created empires, and defeated Rome, then the entire justification for slavery and colonialism collapses. The excuse was always that Europeans were civilizing savages, bringing progress to backwards peoples, lifting Africa out of darkness. But if Africans were already civilized, if they already had empires and cities and trade networks, then slavery was not civilization. It was destroying empires. It was burning libraries. It was stealing wealth. And if your ancestors were emperors, then reparations are not charity. They are debt repayment. Let me show you exactly how they covered this up. Let me show you the names, the institutions, and the methods they used to erase your history. Because this was not some vague conspiracy. This was systematic, deliberate, and ruthlessly effective. Let me start with physical destruction. In 1898, British General Horatio Herbert Kitchener invaded Sudan. His mission was to crush the Mahdist state, an Islamic movement that had taken control of Sudan and was resisting British colonization. On September 2nd, 1898, Kitchener's forces met the Mahdist army at the Battle of Omdurman, just outside the Sudanese capital of Khartoum. The British had machine guns. The Sudanese had sword spears and old rifles. It was a massacre. In 5 hours, 10,000 Sudanese soldiers were killed. The British lost 47 men. 47. Winston Churchill was there. He was a young officer, and he later wrote about the battle, describing it as the most signal triumph ever gained by the arms of science over barbarians. Science over barbarians. That is how they saw it. But Kitchener did not stop at military victory. He had a specific target: the tomb of Muhammad Ahmad the Mahdi, the leader of the Islamic resistance. The tomb was built on the site of ancient Kushite ruins. Kitchener ordered his soldiers to destroy it. They blew it up with explosives. They desecrated the Mahdi's body. And in the process, they destroyed Kushite archaeological sites that had stood for over 2,000 years. This was not collateral damage. Kitchener gave explicit orders to target monuments. British museum records show that during the Sudan campaign, soldiers were instructed to collect artifacts from dismantled monuments and send them back to London. They looted Nubian pyramids. They stripped temples of their decorations. And then they shipped the artifacts to the British Museum, where they were catalogued as acquisitions from provincial Egyptian culture. Not Kushite, not Nubian, Egyptian. Because acknowledging that these artifacts came from an independent black African kingdom was inconvenient. Then there is the Italian invasion of Ethiopia. In 1935, Benito Mussolini ordered the invasion of Ethiopia, one of the few African nations that had remained independent during the scramble for Africa. Mussolini wanted to rebuild the Roman Empire, and he saw Ethiopia as a prize. Italian forces invaded with modern tanks, airplanes, and poison gas. They committed atrocities on a massive scale, and they specifically targeted cultural sites. One of Mussolini's primary objectives was the obelisk of Axum, a 1,700-year-old monument that stood 24 meters tall and weighed 160 tons. Italian soldiers dismantled it piece by piece and shipped it to Rome, where it was re-erected in front of the Ministry of Italian Africa. It stayed there for 68 years. Ethiopia demanded its return for decades. The Italian government refused. It was not until 2005, after years of international pressure, that Italy finally returned the obelisk to Ethiopia. But the obelisk was not the only target. Italian forces bombed churches and monasteries that contained ancient manuscripts. These were not military targets. They were cultural repositories. The Ethiopic Orthodox Church had preserved thousands of manuscripts dating back over 1,000 years, including Bibles, theological texts, and historical chronicles written in Ge'ez script. Estimates suggest that 760,000 manuscripts were destroyed during the Italian occupation. 760,000. That is an entire civilization's written memory burned. And then there is the mining. In the 1800s and early 1900s, European companies and treasure hunters descended on Sudan looking for gold. Nubian pyramids, including the Pyramid of Taharqa at Nuri, were damaged by treasure seekers who believed the burial chambers contained vast riches. They blasted through the tops of pyramids with dynamite. They looted burial goods. They destroyed priceless archaeological evidence in the search for gold. Some of this looting was organized by governments. Some was done by private adventurers, but all of it was legal under colonial law. The colonial authorities did not protect Kushite sites. They licensed their destruction. And when archaeologists later tried to study these sites, they found them already ransacked, their contexts, destroyed their artifacts, scattered across private collections in Europe and America. But the physical destruction was only one part of the suppression. The legal suppression was even more insidious. In 1912, the Egyptian government, which was controlled by the British at the time, passed the Antiquities Law. On the surface, it was designed to protect archaeological sites, but in practice, it was a tool of control. The law required that all archaeological finds be submitted to a board of European experts for authentication. Here is how it worked. If an artifact was determined to have Egyptian origins, meaning it fit the narrative of Mediterranean or Arab Egypt, it was authenticated, catalogued, and put on display in major museums. But if an artifact suggested Black African origins, it was labeled unverified or provincial and stored away in museum basements. This was not a conspiracy theory. This was written into the bureaucratic processes of the Egyptian Antiquities Service. For example, statues of Taharka, clearly depicting a man with African features, were catalogued as late-period Egyptian art. The plaques next to them in museums did not mention that Taharka was from Kush. They did not mention that he was black. They simply said late-period pharaoh and moved on. Visitors to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo could walk past a statue of Taharka and have no idea they were looking at a black African conqueror of Egypt. Then there is the Sudan Condominium, the joint British and Egyptian administration of Sudan, from 1899 to 1956. Under this system, all archaeological work in Sudan required approval from British authorities. And British authorities had a specific agenda. They wanted to frame Kushite history as a subordinate branch of Egyptian history. So Kushite artifacts were categorized as Nubian provincial culture, not as evidence of an independent empire. This classification had real consequences. When museums organized exhibits, Kushite artifacts were placed in the Egypt section, not in an independent Kush or Nubia section. The narrative became Egypt and its southern province rather than Egypt and its rival kingdom. Visitors learned about Egyptian pharaohs who conquered Nubia, but not about Kushite pharaohs who conquered Egypt. The power dynamic was reversed in the telling, and this continues today. UNESCO, the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization, is responsible for designating World Heritage Sites. Egypt has 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites related to ancient Egyptian civilization: the Pyramids of Giza, the temples of Luxor and Karnak, the Valley of the Kings. The list goes on. These sites receive international funding protection and tourist promotion. Kush has 2 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The Pyramids of Meroe were designated in 2011. The archaeological sites of Napata were designated in 2003. That is over 2,000 years after these sites were built, and only in the last 20 years have they received international recognition. The funding ratio is even worse. Egypt receives approximately 20 times more preservation funding than Sudan for archaeological sites. 20 times. Why does this matter? Because without funding, sites deteriorate. Without protection, they are looted. Without tourism infrastructure, people do not visit them. And without visitors, the stories are not told. It is a cycle of erasure that continues today. But the most effective suppression was not physical or legal. It was educational. Let me tell you exactly how they erased Kush from the textbooks. In 1987, Dr. Molefi Kete Asante, a professor at Temple University, conducted a survey of 50 major American history textbooks used in high schools. He was looking for any mention of the Kushite pharaohs, the 25th dynasty, or Black African rule of Egypt. The results, 0%. Not a single textbook mentioned Piye Shabaka Taharka or any of the black pharaohs by name. 100% of the textbooks showed illustrations of ancient Egyptians as white or Mediterranean. When Nubia was mentioned, it was only as a conquered territory, never as a conquering power. The narrative was always the same. Egypt was great. Nubia was peripheral. End of story. This was not an oversight. This was curriculum design. Textbook publishers work with educational consultants, historians, and state education boards to decide what goes in textbooks. And for over a century, the consensus was that African history south of Egypt was not important enough to include. Even when the evidence was overwhelming, even when archaeologists had proven that Kush ruled Egypt, it did not make it into the books. Compare that to how we talk about ancient Greece. The 5th century BC, the time of Pericles and the Parthenon, is called the Golden Age of Greece. It is framed as the peak of Greek civilization, but that is the exact same time period as Taharka's reign in Egypt. If we are going to call Greece's 5th century a golden age, then Kush's 7th century BC should be called a golden age too. But it is not. It is called the late period. The framing is everything. And then there are the universities. In the 1980s, a survey of archaeology departments in American and European universities found that 95% of programs offered 0 courses on sub-Saharan African archaeology. Students could get a PhD in Egyptology without ever taking a class on Kush. They could become professional archaeologists specializing in ancient Egypt and know nothing about the 25th dynasty. It was not until the 2000s, after sustained pressure from Black scholars and activists, that universities started creating courses on African archaeology. Today, out of over 500 archaeology programs worldwide, maybe 5 to 10 offer dedicated courses on Kushite civilization. 5 to 10. Harvard's Egyptology program, one of the most prestigious in the world, did not offer a course on Kush until 2001. Harvard was founded in 1636. That means it took 365 years for Harvard to decide that a kingdom that ruled Egypt for 100 years was worth a single course. And even that course was only created after a Black graduate student demanded it. Oxford University, another leading institution in archaeology, has separate departments for Egyptian archaeology and African archaeology. Think about that. Egypt is in Africa, but Oxford treats Egyptian archaeology and African archaeology as 2 different fields. The implication is clear. Egypt is not really African. Egypt is Mediterranean. Egypt is civilized. Africa is other. This separation is not accidental. It is ideological. It allows scholars to study Egypt without confronting the blackness of Egypt's southern rulers. It allows them to focus on Greek and Roman influences on Egypt while ignoring African influences. It allows them to maintain the fiction that African civilizations were isolated from the great currents of world history. But the suppression did not stop at physical destruction, legal manipulation, and educational erasure. There was also media manipulation, and this is where the lies became part of popular culture, embedded so deeply that even people who never read a history book absorbed them.